Tennessee, Lindsay Holloway. I think it's important that, as we learn about these policies, discuss these policies, and we hear about data and statistics, that we hear the human being and see how these things are affecting real people. And I can think of no better voice than Lindsay Holloway. So Lindsay.
Hi everybody. As she said, my name is Lindsay Holloway. I grew up in a rural area in Middle Tennessee. I was raised by a Christian family in middle class. I was active in sports and clubs, constantly active, doing anything I can. I grew up in youth group, active in constantly every event that we went to. I was actually saved here at the Bridgestone Arena when I was 12 years old. At the same age, my parents divorced, which caused me to rebel, have just horrible, angry feelings. So I started getting involved in drugs. That was how I learned to cope with it. I was not the kid that everybody thought would ever end up in addiction. By 15, I had started using meth. By 16, I was in full-blown addiction. I was able to cover up the addiction until about my senior year. By the time it was the last semester of my senior year, I had dropped completely out of school, been kicked out of my home. And at that time, I really didn't quite comprehend that my life was being thrown away. By the time I was 22 years old, I was an IV drug user. I was also addicted to opiates. And at the age of 24, I had been in and out of jail and arrested about 20 times. At the age of 24, I received my first felony charge. The day that I received the felony charge was the day that I had planned to commit suicide. At this point, sorry, I was caught on this part. At this point, I was about 90 pounds. I'd lost everything, and I had planned that day to overdose and let my family think that it was an accident. And that day was the same day I cried out to the Lord and I asked Him to save me. And that if He wouldn't save me, I was coming home to be with Him. Anything was better than living the way that I was living. And He answered me by an entire police squad surrounding my entire house. Really wasn't the way I wanted them to do it, but it worked. So I walked outside. Normally the police knew that I would run from them. This time I walked outside and handed myself over, and I just felt that peace in my heart that this was the Lord's way of giving me a new life. I had the federal police officers tell me I was the happiest person they'd ever arrested. And the Lord actually delivered me from the withdrawals that normally would have, at this point I was doing about $700 worth of pills and meth a day. So I should have been withdrawing anywhere from 3 weeks to a month. I had absolutely no withdrawal symptoms. I went and was transferred to federal here in Nashville. I was housed in Rutherford County. I was facing 6 to 10 years in prison and $1 million worth of fines. At this point, I've never really been in trouble for more than misdemeanors, and this was a big step up. Every other time I had gone to court, it was just, put back out on probation. Here, go figure it out. That happened to me a year probation for 8 years. And it finally took getting a federal charge in order for someone to think maybe this girl, needs some help. When I was in federal holding, I was given a court-appointed lawyer. This lawyer was a Christian man. He introduced me to a woman named Christy Pomeroy. She did the intake for the next door. She came in and interviewed me, and she went to court with me and discussed with the judge that I was a perfect candidate for her program and that I needed a second chance. She convinced the judge to release me and release my detainer. So I went directly across the street from the federal building to the halfway house at the time, and then right directly across the street from there was the Bridgestone Arena where I got saved. So every single morning I got to get up and look at the federal courthouse and then look at the Bridgestone Arena and decide if I was going to follow the Lord or if I was going to follow the path that I was already on. So every morning I decided to follow the Lord. I went to court for a year and a half. The prosecuting attorney that was on my case at the time wanted to make an example out of me for the women in Middle Tennessee because they were having it was just increasing constantly, the women in Middle Tennessee. He wanted to give me the maximum of 10 years. With federal, that would have been 80%, so I would have done at least 8 years in prison. And my lawyer said the best he could do was 6 years, and I was going to prison for 6 years. And I told him if the Lord wanted me out, then I would be out, and if he wanted me to stay in, then I would stay in. So this time the prosecuting attorney wanted me to do the maximum sentence. At this time I was really growing in the Word and learning, and I found a scripture in Luke that said to pray for those that persecute you, pray for them and do not curse them. So I started praying for him. This man at my next court date wasn't there. He had gotten promoted and moved out west and taken off of my case. So yeah, I was pretty excited. So the next prosecutor that came in was Brad Busek, and he shook my hand and told me to keep doing what I was doing, that everything was going to be okay. And I could just tell in his eyes that he was a Christian man as well. So I went to court for another year. I graduated the program. I continuously spoke at churches and schools and just anywhere that I could share my testimony and try to get kids to see there was a different way. By the time I went to court, my lawyer stood up the day of my sentencing hearing. I turned down a jury. I pled guilty. So my entire life was in the hands of the judge. This judge was the oldest one in the United States, and he hated guns. So that was another thing that was stacked against me. But I got to address him and tell him, all the changes I had made, and that if I was sent to prison, then you get sent to prison because you need to change. And I had already made a drastic change in my life, and the Lord had so completely transformed me that I wasn't recognizable to myself. And the judge ended up giving me 2 years probation and $2,000 in fines. And so I was released. I completed probation with no incidences. Then I started doing ministry, and now I'm currently the executive director of This Is Living Ministries. We are starting a home to house women coming out of incarceration and addiction so that we can disciple them, give them the life skills that they need, interviewing skills, budgeting skills, things they never learned during active addiction. We've recently been given a house, and so now we're fixing to start bringing women in. So we're taking donations for clothing and furniture and cleaning supplies and that kind of stuff. My husband, I met him 2 years ago. My husband was an addict for 15 years. He now has 9 years clean. He is a licensed minister and is actually being ordained by our church. He has a Christian Southern rock band. He also is on the worship team at our church. And then my husband and I disciple men and women at our church that have come out of jail. Our church is in 5 different county jails where we minister, and so now they all come to our church, and our class has grown to 30 people on Thursday nights that we're helping rebuild their lives. But I just wanted to share my testimony and let you all know the hurdles that we've had to jump. My husband and I couldn't rent from anyone because both of us are convicted felons. Since we were following the Lord, we didn't live together until we got married, but we had families that were supportive of us. And the majority of the people that we work with now coming out of jail, they don't have families like we had. Derek was able to live with his father, and I was able to live with my grandmother. But we saved up money and bought a house because people wouldn't rent to us because of our backgrounds. Even though his was 7 years old at the time, and mine was 6 years old, people still looked at us that way. Every single job, I have a pretty good resume. I've been a manager in the last 7 years. I've managed 4 different restaurants. I was a marketing director over 4 different counties. But every single time I change jobs, I have to start over all the way again at the very bottom, like at the factory I just left before ministry. I started out at the very bottom working in the back of the factory and worked my way up to a project coordinator. And I shouldn't have to do that for a crime I did 7 years ago, and I'm completely transformed from that, and shouldn't have to live with that punishment for the rest of my life. Also, when I started college, I had to be immediately put on probation because of my felony background. And I now have a 4.0 at Colorado Christian University, but I had to be put on academic probation immediately. These are just some of the hurdles that we have to fight through in order to get it. And the church is going to have to step in to help these people get through this and to build their worth and their hope and let them know that it's possible and to walk alongside them and to help them. Because without the churches that have poured into me over the last 7 years, I don't know if I would have made it, even with the family support that I had. But I just wanted to share with you all and thank you for your interest in changing the criminal reform policies, and thank you all for coming here today.
Thank you, Lindsay, for sharing that powerful story. Her testimony alone is worth coming to this breakfast this morning. We want to thank you all for being here and taking time out of your day to be here at this breakfast, talking about very important issues. At this time, I want to introduce our panel. We're blessed to have with us Craig DeRoche, who's the Senior Vice President of Advocacy and Public Policy. Also to have Dr. Russell Moore, who's the President of the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. And then our moderator is Pat Nolan, who's the Director of the American Conservative Union Foundation Center for Criminal Justice Reform. I'm going to ask you gentlemen to come up here as we begin our panel.